Let's bring this 9 news. Let's bring this 9 news. Grand Kush, like and subscribe. Here we're dealing with 9 mind, 9 knowledge, and 9 reason. It's the highest science out there for sun people. All right. This video is going to be about the term usage of African American and when was it used, some of the earliest times it was used. Some Black Indians, so-called pretendians today, think the term was only used and popularized by Jesse Jackson in the 1980s. And I'm going to show that that's not really correct. Okay. The term did get repopularized in the 1980s. I do agree with that, but it was in usage in the late 1700s and maybe as early as the 1830s. I'm not going to show too many sources. In this case, 1 or 2 sources would suffice. But when it comes down to using the term African American, it just wasn't used in the 1980s. It wasn't a new term in the 1980s. But better yet, and still, when did African Americans, Black Americans, Afro Americans, Africans, Black people, when did they come out in mass and use the term Indian? Can we find that in history? When did Black people come out in mass and say, hey, we are not Negroes, African Americans, Africans, Afro Americans, colored Blacks, we are Indians? When did that happen? And I got an answer for you. We can answer that real quick. It never happened. Okay, so the push today for Indian is relatively new. You understand what I'm saying? Now, it's a kid out there pushing his Muskogee Indian card because he's a newly registered Muskogee Creek Indian. Okay. But on his card, it'll show you that he is 132nd or 132 or however you say that, right? Native American. He uses the term Native American. He doesn't use indigenous Indian. He uses Black Native American, and he is 132nd or 132 a Muskogee Indian. Okay, that means that you have one great-great-grandparent that could be a full-blood Indian. One. Okay, now you go into genealogy, you might start tying back and saying, well, if it's one full blood, then that parent got to be a full blood, and that parent got to be a full blood, and that's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily true. So in the case of having one great-great-grandparent as a full-blood Indian, does that make your whole heritage and genealogy, your whole bloodline, American Indian? No. Do you understand what I'm saying? It doesn't. It says you have one great-great-grandparent. So who is the rest of the family? Well, if you were a full-blood Native American or American Indian, you shouldn't be putting Black on there at all, because Black designates that you have some type of African ancestry. You understand what I'm saying? At least in America, those who identify with Black are saying that they have some type of African history. Okay, the term Black doesn't designate in America that when you say you're Black Indian, that means that you're indigenous to America, separate from other straight-haired Indians who are claiming Indian as well, and that goes along with the ghosts who's stealing y'all, stealing your heritage. You understand? Let's bring this up right quick, because this is what is pushing this video, is this information right here being used to say that all Africans or African Americans have been misnomered and these people are original Indians or originally Indians. This has nothing to do with those who posted this information, but we got to give credit where credit is due. Now, I seen this, the person with the Muskogee Creek card initially posted this, and it's being reposted by Real Talk with Tim and Phoebe. And it says, so-called African Americans are not from Africa, and they like to hashtag Niji as if Niji is an ethnicity. It isn't. Okay. And they would like to say that this term Niji is an old term, but this is a relatively new term as well. So as you see here, it says, we don't even see the whole write-up, but it says return of colored people to dark continent is impossible owing to material progress made by them. It is announced. Okay, it says Kansas City, Missouri. Okay, my original people were from Kansas City. We're from Missouri, Carthage and Joplin. You can look at the history of those places, and it's deep with American history. All right, disenfranchise the Negro and send him back to Africa. Okay, so when they say that the term Negro is being used here, they might say that they're only talking about Native Americans or indigenous inhabitants to America. That's not necessarily true, although some of the indigenous inhabitants of America, depending on where you were called Negroes. And send them back to Africa, absurd, impossible. More than $1 billion worth of United States real estate, which he owns in his own name in the United States, is not easily to be taken from him. Okay. Now, check this out. If you were taken from America to Africa, in the case of what Dane Calloway said, and you were there over 300 years, the question is, would you still be calling yourself an American? We got to think about that. All right. If you were taken from America and you were taken to Africa, right, and your people was there for over 300 years, would your people still be calling themselves American, or would you be American African? You understand what I'm saying? Because look, you go over there and then you mix in with African people, right? What do you become? This is the same thing here. All right. Besides that Negro is not an African, he is an American. Okay, so we are more American than we are African, right? Okay. African American culture or Black American culture is distinct now because of the experiences that we've had in America, considering history. African is a misnomer. Why? Try to send him to a country which is not his own. Okay. Now, in the case of us being here for so long, right? You cannot, in a sense, just take a Black American to Africa and he would be able to fit in as if he was originally from Africa and been there as long as the inhabitants or natives of Africa have been there. That is not the case. It is no different than a Chinese person coming over here and having to learn how to assimilate into American culture, right? But we're talking about the usage of the term African American, right? So this right here, this is not in a sense, this is not a truth. This is an opinion. So says Dr. J.R. Hawkins of North Carolina, Secretary and Commissioner of Education for the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Okay, you see, this is coming out of this perspective is coming out of the African American Episcopal Methodist Episcopal Church. Let's see if we can even look up J.R. Hawkins. Let's check it out. Searching for that right now. Give me a minute. All right. Make sure I got this guy's name right. J.R. Hawkins of North Carolina. African Methodist. I'm just searching it right now. I want to see if I can find, because his write-up doesn't have a date on it, does it? Don't see a date. All right, this might be the dude right here. Come on, man. All right, this is a book, Internet Archive. Let's see. Richard R. Wright. This might be the guy right here. So this little write-up that we're looking at, right, that we was looking at before may come from this. Trying to make this bigger. Okay. All right, we're not going to spend too much time on this. This is probably a good book to read, though, as far as the African Methodist Church is concerned. Okay. We got a date on here of 1878, 1862, publication date 1916. Okay. J.R. Hawkins, J.R. John Russell Hawkins. So this might be the guy that wrote this little write-up right here. That wrote this right here. Okay. This may even be in the book. I don't know. I'm not sure. But we're gonna talk about African American being used prior to the 1980s, and so we can start with this right here. No preferred racial term among most Black Hispanic adults. Okay. Now this is interesting because this has a graph about Black people agreeing with either using the term Black or African American, or even do they matter? Which one is more important, right? Okay, so we can make this a little bigger, right? It says most Black Americans, 58%, do not have a preference between the terms Black and African American. When asked which term they would rather people use to describe their racial group, the 1 and 3 who expresses a preference divide evenly between preferring each term. All right. So it says Black Americans preferred term for their racial subgroup. So this is Gallup. Let's go up to the top. So this is Gallup, right? I don't know about this website too much. And I don't even know if this poll is how they got this poll together, right? But we'll look at it. The terms Black and African American are both used to refer to the racial subgroup of Americans. Which term do you think should generally be used? Black, African American, another term, or does it not matter to you either way? Now look, Black and African American are both at the same number. And then it says 58%, it doesn't matter. Another term, other, no opinion. Okay. So Black people in American, based on this poll, don't care if we're called Black or African American. So when it says another term though, how come Indian is not placed on this poll? Right now, I don't know how the poll got together, but it's talking about how we think. We chose to use the terms Black. We chose to use the terms African American, and we chose to stick with the terms Negro. As Black intellects in America, these all were discussed, disputed, debated, criticized, right? But when it comes down to these terms weren't just placed on us by the white man. We chose to use these terms ourselves. The question is, how come the term Indian isn't widely used amongst Black people? Why is this like, oh, we just figured out that we're Indians, so now we're going to use the term Indians? Nah, man, we never really used the term Indians throughout history dealing with us and getting our freedoms in America. All right. These findings from a June 1st, July 5th Gallup poll are similar to Gallup's prior tracking of Black Americans' preferred terms using a differently worded question asked from 1991 to 2019. The new wording makes it clear that the question is asking what the group should be called, not how the respondent prefers to be referred to themselves. Okay. The earlier surveys also found majority saying it didn't matter to them which term was used, and usually no clear preferred term was identified among those who did have a preference. Now, here we go. This is what, now let me go back here. So this is going to break this in and make more sense with this. Okay. So on this, with Tim and Phoebe, right, and posting this, you're going to see my entry. And here's what my entry says. So that's 415 people on here that like this, right? And I'm sure some people don't even really understand what they're reading. They're just going along with the status trend and the status quo and the new trend right now. So I put on here, Dan Calloway said hundreds of thousands of the Indians were shipped to Europe, then Spain, and then Africa, were shipped back to America in the transatlantic slave trade and were given the misnomer of African Americans. How did they forget they were Indians? Do you think that is a great question to name Calloway's write-up? 98% of African Americans are indeed native Indians, or in our old millions. This is what he wrote in 2015, right? Okay. So to go along with this, even though this only has 7 comments and 7 likes, right? Those who wanted to get on this little conversation and add their 2 cents. Fortune, it says, the term African American came about in the 1980s. Okay, he shouldn't be saying this to me though. He should be saying this to Dan Calloway, right? So the term came along with the 1980s, and that's the Jesse Jackson repopularizing African American, right? Dan Calloway got a weird agenda, in my opinion. Who was shipping these Indians to Spain and Africa? Exactly. Now, look, I don't know if this person ever seen my video. I just dropped a video on it, right? And this is the question I asked. Who was shipping these Indians to Spain and Africa? He left out Europe. Next entry, go look at the information, and it wasn't 1980s. It was the 70s. Get your information right. Now, this person, Sharif Brown, is posting this at me. This is sometimes how ignorant we can be. When I didn't say it, Dan Calloway said it, right? You know what I mean? My information is right because I know that African American was used prior to the 1980s and the 1970s. Okay. Now, Fortune comes back as Sharif. Okay, let's say it was the 70s for argument's sake. It wasn't the 1880s. It was, in fact, it was before the 1880s, and I'm going to show you that. Like I said, when were these Indians being shipped around Europe and Africa, then back to the Americas? That's the same answer that I want. This is the same answer that I want. You understand what I'm saying? Now, a lot of these dudes dealing with this information are following Dan Calloway, even though some of their pages or channels on YouTube may predate 2015. I'm sure that some of these people that's talking about this Black Indian information, this is not the reason why they started their YouTube channels, right? So you can delete some information, some videos off your channel and recreate, you know, on your channel. All right. So Aborigine at Grand Kush, the colonizers renamed us. Now look how they be busting themselves out, and they don't even know what they doing, how they making themselves look ignorant. The colonizers renamed us. Copper-colored, brown-skinned American Indians. They called us Negroes. Okay, so you got renamed as a copper-colored, brown-skinned American Indian, and then you got renamed as a Negro. All right, so I hit him, Fortune, exactly, because I want to know the answer. Here's the link to the write-up. So you can go here if anybody wants to see this link to his write-up, even though I use it in my videos, right? This is Tim and Phoebe right here with this post, and then there's a link to Dan Calloway's write-up. Y'all make sense of that, and I go back and hit Aborigine with exactly Indian in America is a colonizer's term. That is the truth, okay? But in the case of this video, we're talking about when was African American used, because we're talking about the 70s, we're talking about the 1800s, and we're talking about the 1980s. All right, so let's go back to this. This is just one source right here. Okay, so it says, although the term African American was used as early as 1782, it was popularized in the late 1980s by a group of Black leaders, including Reverend Jesse Jackson, who argued that the term had cultural integrity. But like Gallup's findings today, the Black public mostly had no preference between the two terms in the early 1990s and the following decades, while similarly sized minorities preferred one over the other. All right. So to understand this poll, if you see the straight line, straight green bar is prefer African American, the blue bar, black bar is prefer Black, and the hash marks, cross hash means doesn't matter. Now look. In some cases, though, you'll see that African American is even preferred over Black. All right. But you get to 2019, it's level. You see that? So in 2007, you know, we was up with the African American terms based on this poll. All right. Now it says style guides of the Associated Press and the National Association of Black Journalists say that both Black and African American are acceptable terms. Now, we chose to use the term black. Okay. The term black was became popular based on Black and Beautiful in the 1960s and 70s. Anytime that the term black was used in the 60s and after the 60s into the 70s, okay, it was a power term. It wasn't a term that we use based on the definition of the term. It was a power term. Okay. James Brown made it popular with "I'm Black and I'm Proud." You understand what I'm saying? Black and Beautiful was out there. So when we know when we use the term black, it is referring to people with African ancestry in America connecting back to their culture, right? It doesn't mean we were connecting back to any Indian culture. Okay. Societal accepted terms do change over time. Gallup found in 1969 that Negroes was the most popular term among Black Americans at the time. Okay, so in this case, Negro, and it's a link there, so obviously that's a reference. This Negro was not tying back to Black Indian. It was still tying back to Black people who considered themselves having African ancestry. While at the time, while colored people and Blacks were about equally as preferred, okay, each by about 1 in 5, and Afro-Americans were favored by 1 in 10. So colored people in a sense can also mean mulatto. When you talk about Black people being colored, right? Mixed. But when you talk about colored people, when you're dealing with Black people, that don't necessarily mean you're a full-blooded anything. All right. Because any Black person that has green eyes, light skin and green eyes, is not a full-blooded Black person. You understand? Or full-blooded African. You know, usually a person with a Black person, light skin, green eyes, things of that nature is mixed. Okay. Gallup primarily used the term Negro in early decades of polling, including its very first question about Black people in 1939, though the term colored people was used as well. Both terms were retired by the company in the early 1970s when Black became a staple term Gallup used to poll about Black Americans thereon. Okay. If you had to choose which term you'd lean toward, African American or Black, why didn't I say an Indian? Right? Why didn't I say an Indian? Okay. So that's one source right there. Now, we can check this out. I haven't seen this. Black versus African American. Let's just see what it says. Okay, this is somebody's opinion. Let's see. All right. Oh, yeah, you got to consider as well Afro Caribbean, Afro Cuban, Afro means African. Okay. The Caribbeans is not dropping that, right? Let's see. As the world has progressed, terminology has changed, and while African American and Black have become commonly used expressions in this day and age, other terms such as Negro and colored are now considered out of date and wrong. All right. So this is also mentioning the Gallup poll. So how can PR professionals know what term to use? Well, there is such a thing as inclusive language. This has been defined as working to avoid being disrespectful or offensive by circumventing language that may suggest or imply ideas that are racist, sexist, or prejudiced. Inclusive language also aims to have communication that would not exclude people. Terms like I guess this is Black, Indigenous, people of color, or I don't know what that whole, Black, Indigenous, and people of color have garnered popularity but aren't universally loved. Further complicating things is a 2019 Gallup poll. Gallup, known for its public opinion surveys conducted worldwide, found that the large majority of Black Americans have said the use of Black versus African American doesn't matter to them. Okay. Um, Still, the term Black does seem to be a better choice. The term is a celebration of the race and culture itself, and who doesn't like a good celebration? All right, so that's just in the words of the late great James Brown, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. All right, so that's just an opinion right there. All right. All right, so let's just pop in the real source. So they said as far back as 1782, right? Excuse me. All right, so the earliest known mention of the term African American is in a 16-page pamphlet entitled A Sermon on the Capture of Lord Cornwallis, published in 1782. The term Afro American was used from the 1960s to the early 1990s and held at similar meaning as African American. Okay, so here's um, the write up. Okay, where is it? There we go. Okay. If you look on the bottom, it says two sermons written by the African American, one on the capture of Lord Cornwallis, right, to be sold, okay, by blah, blah, blah. And I wonder if we can find that. Let's see if we can find that. Let me see if we can find that right quick. Yeah, let's do that. It's not it right there. Do I gotta put this dude's name? What's his name? 1782. I'm trying to find if I can see if I can find the pamphlets. I'm not seeing it though. Anti-dating of African American. What is this? The African American 1835, Cornwallis. Yeah, okay. So I thought I could find it, but it's probably I gotta dig a little deeper into that. But yeah, but that is the first instance right there of using the term African American, right? It says African American has been documented as early as 1831. So even in the case, my man mentioned that even if it was the 1880s, right? The term has been in use. So I'm gonna leave this video with the question: when did Black people in America in the 60s, 70s, 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, after the 1900s, prior to the 1900s, the late 1800s, come out in mass and say, we're Indians? All right. So, you know, you got to be careful with just falling for stuff like this. All right, because any Indian that's considered themselves Black Indians or what Black Native Americans, you're saying that you have African ancestry, and I challenge you to prove that to be wrong. Like and subscribe. Grand Kush, y'all hold it down. Stay peaceful.